Shashank, thanks very much for being with us.
You're very welcome.
Is there very substantial ground progress by Russian soldiers 20 odd days into the war? Is this where they expect it to be?
The short answer is yes, there is substantial ground progress. They have taken over quite substantial swaths of the south of the country. They've surrounded Mariupol and besieged it. They have occupied Kherson, although they faced, as you may have seen, substantial opposition from Ukrainian residents. They have also pushed out from the Donbass region in the east, and Russian forces are on the west and east of Kiev, including within 25 kilometers of the city center, within rocket artillery range. So, yes, they have made progress, but I would say two things, Vishnu. First of all, that progress has come at extraordinary cost. We have probably seen the highest rate of Russian casualties in a war since the Second World War, more than in the Russian occupation of Afghanistan. So the question number one is it sustainable? Mm-hmm. And question number two is that the advances that we have seen so far do not necessarily tell us about the ease of advances that may come in the following weeks. Mm-hmm. Because as you know very well, and I'm sure viewers know very well, urban warfare, the task of surrounding, besieging, and seizing a large city the size of Kiev, is a profoundly difficult and costly task. And it is by no means clear to me, from what I have seen and from some of the things that you have been describing just now, that Russian forces who are, have taken losses, are somewhat demoralized, maybe suffering from high equipment losses, that they're up to the task of seizing a city like Kiev. That isn't obvious at this stage, I would say.
Shashank, as we look at the ground situation now, are we gradually seeing a shift from where we were, say, 3 days back or 4 days back, when there was an actual sense that Ukrainian forces were going to push back the Russians or inflict such losses which would be untenable for Russia to sustain, to now, perhaps Russia gaining the upper hand partially because of the indiscriminate shelling that we are seeing in so many cities?
I think it's too early to draw any firm conclusions on that. I still have seen successful Ukrainian counterattacks, particularly around Kiev, and they have held those Russian forces at bay outside of the city. Russia has made progress, but it's behind where it wanted to be. It doesn't mean Ukraine is going to be able to push back the Russians all the way back to Belarus or mount very substantial counterattacks, but nor does it mean that Russia's offensive is sustainable. In military terms, officers and military professionals talk about the culminating point of an offensive. And that's the point at which an offensive runs out of steam. That is, you suffer casualties, your equipment breaks down, morale is low, you're exhausted. And it doesn't mean Russia is defeated. It means Russia has to pause, regroup, move on to the defensive while it resupplies its forces, which is apparently proving to be a substantial problem, as you outlined at the beginning, and then recommence its offensive. We will only know whether the Russian army is capable of that in the coming weeks. It's too early to say. And I would say that even if Russian forces prove to be exhausted in the coming weeks, it doesn't mean this is great news for Ukraine. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that Vladimir Putin is going to march his army straight back home. It could just as well, in my opinion, presage an escalation. And I still think we should be aware of the possibility of the chemical weapons being used in Ukraine. And that would be the first time chemical weapons have been used on a European battlefield in over 100 years.